Welcome to the Lookfar Podcast, Voices from the Wild. Join Lookfar Conservation as we talk to conservation leaders from around the world about their work, their life, the challenges they face, and the successes they've had.
Welcome to the Lookfar Podcast. Here today with special guests. On today's podcast, we're talking to the Small Mammal Conservation Organization, SMACON, working on ecological research, conservation action, and community engagement in Nigeria, with a specific focus on bats. Our guests today are Dr. Iroro Tanchi and Dr. Benneth Obite, who co-funded SMACON in 2016. We'll be talking about the important role bats play in the ecosystem as pollinators and pest controls, eating insects and mosquitoes, and how working on the protection of this small mammal is a game changer for the region and potentially even globally, how it impacts our health and well-being. Working in the Guinean forests of West Africa and the Cross River National Park bordering Cameroon in the north, it's a neglected, overlooked, yet highly biodiverse region with a much higher biodiversity than the more famous Congo Basin. I'm Marlies Quirino, and today I'm with my colleague Lucia Guaita. Hi, Lucia.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. And we're also here with our first guest, Dr. Iroro Tanchi.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for having me. I'm very pleased to be here.
And we're also joined by Iroro's colleague, Benneth Obite. Hi, Benneth.
Hi, Marlies. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Good. Great to have you. Okay, we've got a lot to cover today, but I suppose the question on everyone's mind is probably, because you focus on bats, why bats? How did it start? Why did you pick bats?
Well, first of all, the science side of the story is bats comprise 50% of the mammals you have in tropical areas, particularly tropical forests. Just think about half of the diversity, mammal diversity, is bats. But they're also globally distributed. That means you can find them anywhere, you can study them anywhere, you can enjoy them anywhere, really. Except for a few islands, they're everywhere. But they're also significantly understudied. It's understandable, right? They're nocturnal animals. If you really want to get into just understanding bats, you really just walk at night, primarily because that's the peak period of activity. So that, I think, walking at night makes it really difficult for a lot of people to hang out and say, let's go study bats. People like to be in bed at night, not finding bats. But in my case, how I got into bats is a different other story. And I was just inspired by a talk during a field course describing an incredible research in Ivory Coast by a Swedish student. And I was just drawn to the fact that very exciting research could be happening in West Africa. That just blew my mind because these students would be up in the forest canopy, trapping bats and looking for bats that are visiting flowers and collecting the flower scent. It sounded like the most intricate and exciting kind of science for me. I just wanted to be part of it. End of story.
Well, for me, I was first captivated by, the acuteness before finding out about the great ecosystem services. I think it was about a couple of years after you started working with bats, and we met in University of Benin. So I volunteered to follow her to the field. And I think it was 2 nights in, and we caught this bat. It's the Cyclops. I could never forget that day. It's the Cyclops round-leaf bat. It feels like a puppy because it's very woolly and cuddly. And I was like, okay, I've never seen anything like this before. Before then, I spent most of my time in freshwater studying aquatic organisms. And this was my first time being in the forest for 10 days. It was amazing. I was like, I think this is it. And then this bat is amazing. It's the cutest thing you will ever see. If you don't know, there are about 1,500 bat species globally. And in Nigeria, we have more than 100 species. This is huge diversity. And it's all kinds of cuteness, from dog-faced bats to bats looking like rhinos and hippos. Take your pick. So this was my first fascination. And then our second field study, I found out people were hunting these bats in thousands, and it was so heartbreaking that day. And this kind of just formed my interest in bats. How do we then protect them? How do we make sure this bundle of cuteness don't go into extinction? And then
Amazing. I don't think there's many people that got into bats because of their cuteness. Why are they so important?
So they are very efficient seed dispersers. So they pick up fruits at night and then they keep chewing on the fruits, sucking the juice while they fly. And when they are done, they just drop them wherever they are. Also, they poop while flying. This is an efficient way of dispersing seeds because lots of them fly hundreds of kilometers at night. This means they can pick a fruit here and then 100 kilometers later, it's somewhere else, right? So, and this is great. This keeps the forests going. But then also they go beyond that and they do pollinate very, very important plants. Some of those can only be pollinated by bats because they open momentarily just once at night. And if a bat does not visit it, it means it doesn't get pollinated. In fact, in Nigeria, there are very important spices that bats service. And without bats, we wouldn't have those spices. They also help suppress insect pests. They save farmers millions and millions of dollars. And this is documented across the globe. Millions and millions of dollars in avoided cost from insecticide use. So they have all this very important ecosystem services. But of course, what is more popular is what is shown in movies, how bats are vampires. And when they want to introduce any scary part of the movie, they play a song, Gung Gung, and then a bat starts flying out of the caves. So this has not helped bats.
I wanted to ask, so how does this negative visualization that you describe from movies and maybe even documentaries also trickle down to how the rural communities that you also work with think and feel about bats?
I'm not going to say the movies, the visual media depiction of bats is the main reason why, we have lots of myths about bats. But culturally, as we just talked about, they are mysterious. People don't see them all the time, so they just assume things about them. So in Nigeria and West Africa, people mostly think bats are witches, evil, and all kinds of things. This is cultural. And this perception is what we have been trying to change in the last decade through outreaches, through using demonstrating ecosystem services and continuous engagement and talking to communities, as well as teaching children in schools, because this is very powerful, try to change the values. And this also makes the bat conservation very complex because
Yes.
in one place they think bats are witches, and next time you're eating bats. So they are heavily hunted as well, some species. And you come to understand that they select the ones to call witches and select the ones to eat. So it's very complex. And that's why we do a lot of behavioral study to actually understand what the main drivers are. Why are people eating the bats? And it changes from one culture to the other. Sometimes it's the taste and some other community dynamics. So when you're planning intervention, you then have to make sure you target those drivers and capture that in your intervention instead of just throwing money at because people just assume people are poor. That's why they 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 consume bushmeat, which is usually not the case. And this is why lots of conservation interventions fail.
Wow, this is extremely fascinating, and it's something that I really didn't know. So the fact that people might have a positive attitude towards that, maybe for costumes and historical reason, does not necessarily mean that they do not hunt them or that there's no harm to the bats. So that's actually quite tricky. So can you give us an example of, for instance, like one conservation intervention that you've taken out with people that have a positive attitude towards bat versus one where people are completely scared about them?
Oh, I've got a perfect example for this. All right. So, so the Benin City colony is right in the city center. That spot is right next to the King's Palace, and there are trees there that host bats. That story about positive perception towards bats because they think bats bring good luck because they consider bats to be clean. This is only when you are using it as a like a necklace or a charm that the witch doctor made for you. But as far as having bats in your backyard or parking your car under a tree that has bats on it, people do not like that very much. In fact, that in addition to the broader perception of witchcraft means people always want to just scare bats away from their backyard. And the government secretariat, so this is where a lot of the government offices are, just right close to this colony. They have done everything to try to eliminate bats. They will fumigate them, all kinds of things. And in one instance, they wanted to cut down the trees. So I got wind of it. Someone just mentioned it casually, and I just walked up to the director and I was like, you cannot do this. This is not what environmental management is about. So I asked them, what's the biggest problem? He said, bats are pooping on people's cars. Well, if bats are pooping on people's cars, maybe we should find them a parking spot, covered parking. So build a covered parking. And so that's kind of how I got them to not cut down those trees. So it's really about working with people and figuring out what's the real hot points, like Ben was saying. When the relationships are kind of complicated and complex like this, you really have to get down to the real crux of the matter to be able to find a solution that works for everybody.
And here's something interesting. When you disturb their roost or fumigate or try to put fire or whatever disturbance, they get stressed very easily. And when they get stressed, they shed more viruses. And you're causing more and more health risks for people. We try to explain all this, but I think one of the roosts, they ended up fumigating one of the roosts or chasing them out.
That's also a little topic to dive into further, the spreading of viruses. You mentioned it briefly, because that's a connotation many people also have with bats. So how come when they're stressed, they spread more viruses, you says?
So every species in the wild has some form of viruses or other kinds of agents of diseases, but there's the natural barriers between humans and wild species. They live in their habitat, we stay away from that. But because of encroachment, we are destroying their habitats through deforestation, habitat fragmentation, and all that. And part of what that does is these species are now coming in contact more often with humans. And the chances of contacting zoonotic diseases from them is higher. And for bats and for most species, when they are stressed, the immune system becomes compromised, they start shedding more viruses. And because now we are coming more in contact with this species, there are cases where people went to caves to to try to kill bats and chase them away from the caves, and that led to some form of people contacting diseases from bats.
So getting back to, we know now why bats are important, and their habitat is being disturbed. It's becoming smaller and smaller, but it's very important to protect them and to conserve them. What is your approach? How do you go about it?
Right. So we generally take an evidence-based approach. Because there are limited resources, you have to prioritize. You identify what species needs the most action, what species has the most threats, and so you start from there. But we had just discovered the short-tailed round-leaf bat in Nigeria. At the time, it wasn't known to occur in Nigeria. It's a very rare species. It hadn't been seen in the wild for 45 years at the time. We were up in the mountains trapping bats at night when we spotted fires. And within 2 hours, the fires approached our camp and we had to evacuate. That just meant picking up whatever equipment we could carry that we could not easily replace, and then covering the rest of our equipment with blankets and wet blankets, so that if the fire sweeps through, the damage will be minimal. But this was done under like 30 minutes because we also had a mountain to descend at night. So we were basically running for our lives while thinking of equipment and just being extremely worried about, it meant this field season was over for sure. And so we descended the mountain that night, got to the village about 12 a.m. When we looked back, it felt like we had just escaped hellfire, something like that. It was fire everywhere. When that happens, when such a tragedy happens, there are a few things you can do. Of course, you start by freaking out, which I did, because this was my PhD. In any case, what that does to you is, I think it ignites something, pun intended, ignites something in you to just go fight till the very last moment. And that's exactly what we started doing. We talked to community members, asked them, why are there fires? Like, where's it coming from? And we got told it comes from farms. When people use fires to clean their land, sometimes it spreads into forests. And they've had big fires in the past. So we decided, well, let's go talk to the broader community. Let's get people together. As soon as we set up this town hall meeting, everybody wanted to speak. They were interested. There was energy in the room. And that really lifted my spirits, because it meant, okay, people want to contribute to this. She basically stood up and said, all of this talk is just because we can no longer tell when to burn, when to use fires on our farms because of climate change. This is something that's culturally relevant to them. They have been using fires on their farms for generations, thousands of years, if you will. But it's become so difficult for them to predict when to burn, because the rainfall patterns are now erratic. So she said in her lifetime, it had changed. The climate had changed. But she wasn't quite using the word climate. She was saying rain, because but essentially, these are people on the front lines of climate change, and they see the impact every day. So for us, that was a signal that we could do something. We could actually respond. We could actually support local people who want to put out fires. And that's exactly what we did. So that's kind of how we got our start with serious active conservation. And we co-designed projects with local people. We found funds, relentlessly trying to find funds, because, Nigeria is not typically considered a conservation or tourism destination. It's like people think, the Niger Delta has basically, and the oil there has basically destroyed everything we have in Nigeria. But that's not necessarily true. We still have some really nice protected areas that hold a lot of biodiversity, especially on the border with Cameroon. This is Africa's oldest forest we're talking about. So a place of high endemism. In fact, it's considered the most diverse, the area with the highest diversity of moths and butterflies. And I can tell you that, I completely agree with that, because every time you move from site to site, it's something completely different you're seeing. And in fact, sometimes we feel at a loss that we're not butterfly biologists ourselves. Even for bats too, the broader area is considered the largest area hotspot diversity for bats in Africa. So it's no joke that we're able to work in this place, but also that we're able to protect bats in this place. So that's kind of how we got our start. It's that fire igniting this spark in us and pushing us to just go.
We identify the drivers of that problem, and then we specifically target the drivers. The fire, we have identified climate change, right, as a problem. This community don't know they no longer are able to predict the weather, because they used to be able to do that, right? But now they are no longer able to do that. They want to be told. So we now had to set up weather stations across the community where we collect real-time weather, day-to-day weather, microclimate information, humidity, wind speed, temperature, and all that we can use to model fire risk. And then we communicate this to farmers using signposts to say, hey, today is not a good time to burn. So we have 3: medium risk, high risk. But then we went beyond that to also have 50 forest guardians in these communities that we equip them with firefighting equipment and mobility. They have bikes. So on the very high risk days, they will patrol the farms to make sure nobody's burning. But if people burn and fire spread, they will be able to respond immediately before it moves over to another farm and then gets to the forest. And the last year, we were able to stop almost about 100 fire incidences from escalating. So in the last 3 years, since after the COVID, we have had 0 wildfires. And this is because of this integrative intervention. We also use community structure, something that is already existing, which is very important.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly mention that I had the really, really great pleasure to see all your great work, and including the work of the Forest Guardians, which I had the great pleasure to meet. All of these 50 people, both women and men, are so enthusiastic about the work that they do, the collective mission that they are part of, because they really feel part of this group, and they're so proud to wear the uniform and to, really speak up for what's going well, what can be improved. And it just was so unbelievable, to think that from this episode that you just described to us, in 2016 to nowadays, you were able to really manage those fires to 100%, you said. So yeah, big congratulations for the great work, and also, the grassroots strategy approach that you've been able to put in place to really mitigate those fire. I also wanted to learn from you, since this program on the Forest Guardians and on fire prevention is going so well, what's the future looking like in this program? Do you want to expand the program, being so successful? What are some of the next steps?
Thank you. That's a really good question. And in many ways, it seems like scale up is the next only option. That's because if you look across West Africa, a lot of the protected areas are beset by fires, because it's kind of the same story. Almost all protected areas are surrounded by farmlands. We're talking about smallholder farmlands. These are not mechanized farms that are huge and what have you. Just smallholder farms surrounding almost every protected area out there. And very few places know what to do when fire happens. The biggest thing that we can bring from this is recognizing that we can actually work with local people and forest rangers to prevent fires. You want to prevent it because we typically don't have this sort of budgets to respond when the big fire happens. So you want to prevent. Prevention is the best thing. prevention is almost the only way, really. Because when those fires happen, they get out of hand. You can't do anything until the rains come. So what we've been doing is we've been talking to a few colleagues, primarily on that Nigeria-Cameroon border, to first expand it to them. We're starting also, in fact, with the Cross River National Park, the southern part of the Cross River National Park, because the Cross River National Park has two sectors. We're currently working in the northern sector. And in fact, the 50 forest guardians that you met, Lucia, at the Afi Mountain Wildlife Sanctuary, that's just one part. The other part is community people on the Obudu Plateau protecting the Cross River National Park, the northern sector of the Cross River National Park. It started as a 4,000 square kilometer protected area. A lot of it's been encroached on, but it's still under significant threat from wildfires. So we really want to expand it there, and we've been talking and working with these managers. But that's just the beginning of the scale up. The rest of it is across the Lower Guinean forest. Lots and lots of protected areas that we can save from fires.
That's amazing. Amazing accomplishment. Do the people working with you on fire prevention, the communities, do they realize the link with conservation?
So to begin with, the communities that we work at are fairly familiar with the concept of conservation because there have been lots of long-term programs in the area working on conservation for one thing or the other, gorillas, drill monkeys, things like that. But if we're being honest, at the core, they are interested in saving their land. Okay, so they want to save their crops from fires, period. But because we didn't come to them as agricultural extension service workers, we said, look, we're bad conservationists. We want to work with you to make sure fires don't get to the forest. Part of it is it will also protect your farmland. And so they recognize that it's a bat-focused project, or at least a biodiversity-focused project. But they are grateful for the dual benefits. And in fact, in many ways, they also recognize that the more the forest is protected, the better their chances of encouraging ecotourism. That is very important for household incomes in these places. I mean, these are communities that are almost 100% agricultural occupation. So for the individuals there, it will be 100% agriculture. And it's very seasonal, the type of agriculture they do. It's primarily cocoa. And so you harvest cocoa within a very short period of time, 3 months or so. And that's kind of when you sell it off. So they're seasonally rich. But before you know it, all that money is gone and they're back to extreme poverty. So a lot of the ecotourism is very significant for increasing household income. And in fact, in our case, we also consider a lot of our programs, not just the fire program, we have lots of other programs that contribute to household income and thus poverty alleviation. So there's the real mesh, there's a real connection between agriculture, people's local needs, conservation, development, because in some cases we're developing parts of this versus that, or supporting one initiative in the community to get things going. There's a real nice sort of mixing of these needs and concepts. And ultimately, there is no compartmentalization of the solution. It is one solution that saves and solves many things. Biodiversity, including bats, farmland, and so livelihoods, but even additional funding, additional income through working on our programs, for example, or even the forest being protected and attracting ecotourism. All of those things is this nice sort of cloud or ecosystem of developmental and conservation and humanitarian almost approaches. And that's, we see ourselves very much as wearing many hats. And sometimes I'm like, I really am just a biologist, but suddenly you're more than that, and we're grateful for that opportunity. It's a real privilege to be able to work in these communities.
Thank you for that. That was very clear. Fire prevention addresses one of the threats, which is loss of habitat, loss of forests. But I understand they're also hunted, which is another threat. Now that's embedded in the culture. How would you go about that? How is that something you also address?
Oh, yes. We are typically what people do in some places would be to go try to scare people and say, hey, bats carry diseases. If you eat them, you're going to get diseases. And they look back at you and say, well, we've been eating it for generations and we are still here. So of course, we know that never really works. First thing we did was to try to understand, this was actually part of my PhD, to really understand why people are hunting bats and why they are eating bats. And the major driver is the taste. The gamey taste apparently tastes really good. So we had several engagements and community town hall meetings and then surveys to identify an alternative meat, an alternative protein source with similar taste profile. Not just to come and say, hey, take chicken, or let's have alternative livelihood, chicken or beef. So what we are currently working with them on is, so we have cane rat farms, which we are scaling across other communities. So it's a huge rodent. It's quite big, up to 8 kilograms, I think. It tastes good. It has that gamey taste.
What's the name? What animal is it?
It's cane rat. Cane rat. CANE. So it's now farmed across West Africa because people love it. And of course, they are rodents, so they reproduce very quickly. So we now have these farms, but we are also doing extensive outreaches, education outreaches, demonstrating ecosystem services of bats and saying how hunting will impact these ecosystem services. And we don't just say, hey, bats are good pollinators and they are good dispersers. No, we use community-specific ecosystem services. So we identify the plans in each community bats service and say, hey, bats are the reason why you have this specific products, and this is why you should, reduce, eating them and hunting them. And we have had some significant reduction since we started in 2016. So there is lots of optimism.
Oh, amazing. Let's hope it catches on, the cane rats. Please keep us posted. And I assume they're native to the region. Otherwise,
yes.
Assuming you would never do that, of course. But it seems like a useful alternative to not have to go into caves and buy it or farm it, something that is just as yummy as the bats. Great. So we know that you're working on fire, you're doing on education, you even created a whole new alternative protein source. But how big is your team and how many people do you have to help you and where are you based?
So we are based out of 2 offices in Nigeria, in Benin City and Calabar. So in the Benin City office, we're close to the Okomu National Park. In Calabar, we're close to the major sites that most of our projects currently are in the Afi Mountain Wildlife Sanctuary and Cross River National Park. So they're both administrative and field residential offices. Our team comprises of about 9 people right now, the core team. But we also have an incoming board because we're sort of transitioning away from just leadership by just Ben and myself to a board-led program to support the core team and what the board is doing for us. We've also got an advisory board that sort of helps us think about how to make it as effective as possible and support it. Now, beyond those people, we've got community-based teams. There's a seasonal team that's out in the Obudu Plateau, about 40 people. They're just, community members who are available and willing to help fight fires there. But we've got the main one, which is the Forest Guardians, 50 people, in addition to data technicians who collect weather data daily, year-round. So that's 10 people. We're looking at least across communities, we're somewhere around 120 people on any given day. Because not only are we fighting fires, for fire-damaged habitats, we're also restoring them. So we've got the Kudjo women. So Kudjo is Buki word for forest. So the Kudjo women are basically primarily leading our restoration efforts. They look for seeds in the forest, so native seeds in the forest. We're primarily targeting a few endangered plant species, but also a few not endangered, but what we call early succession stage. That is, these plants that first arrive at a damaged site. So we've got a mix of species in there. They identify or gather those seeds, and they plant them in plant nursery. So we plant nurseries expanding. Our target's about 10,000, or we want to hit 10,000 seedlings that are getting planted. In fact, we've just started one pilot site to restore the land. So on any given day, it can be somewhere around 120 people on the team.
We also have a fiscal partnership with an organization in the US, and this has helped us a lot, called Wildlife Conservation Network, where American organizations and individuals donate money to us, tax deductible donations to us. And this has helped us for, I think, the last couple of years.
The real solutions that we find is because of the people that we work with. If you think about all of these different problems, it's there because there's a coordination vacuum. Okay. So people know what to do. There are probably even laws on policies. The times we've contributed to policy development, it's not because people don't know you have to fight fires. It's just because maybe you need to coordinate increase in the fines and coordinates who then goes to execute that order, so to speak. There are policies across the region. There are solutions on the ground. We just need to coordinate that work. And I think that's where we consider our work truly pivotal, is that we're able to work with different people to coordinate all of these things. And we feel really privileged that we've been able to get people's trust to then be able to lead that coordination.
We know that aside from all the amazing conservation work that you already described, you also have so much at your heart is also the mentoring and rising the next generation of local conservationists. And this not just for the Nigerian conservationists, but also for the West African conservationists. So it's a much broader group of young talents. So I would just love to, to ask you to please tell us more about the West African Mammal Fellowship, and also from what need that did this project with the next generation grew.
Yes. So the West Africa Mammal Fellowship is actually part of the West Africa Mammal Partnership. We very quickly realized that, the problems that we have in Nigeria are shared across West Africa. Very similar environmental problems, very similar conservation needs. But you can't just go into these countries and start solving the problems yourself. If anything, one of the reasons we've been effective is because we live there. And even during COVID, what we found is the people on the ground, they're the ones who are the true conservationists. Because during COVID, everybody else left where whatever part was in their country or their state or city, in fact, everybody was at home. But the people in the village, community-based teams, were the ones really driving stuff. So you can really start to think about how conservation can be truly led by community-based groups. But before you even get to that, you sort of need a lot of trained local support, trained in-country support. Within it was the need to actually raise the next generation as a critical priority for the program. We've got this whole broad mission that is truly encompassed by the definition of planetary health. It's everything. It's biodiversity. It's climate. It's health. Now, we had previously started a fellowship in Nigeria for bat conservation. It became quickly obvious that this partnership will be a very good way to not just streamline, but consolidate that project so that students in labs of partners, academic partners at least, can then get trained through this program so that we're not just focusing only on Nigerian students, but now we're able to have a broader impact across the region and able to set students up to be trained so they have the expertise, but then set them up even after they're trained with other partner organizations, so conservation organizations, for example, with whom they then conduct a 2-year bat protection project. And they're all there doing their PhDs and masters and getting supported through a network of international and local partners. So local professors in the region who have students, but also international partners who teach and mentor on all kinds of things, from how to design a field project, how to deploy a field project, how to write a manuscript, an academic manuscript, how to design a conservation project, how to apply for funding.
But also how the motivation for this, which is very important, is when we started with bat research, there were really no mentors for us. We really struggled, no local mentors. So we had to go through a whole lot to get opportunities, to get materials, to get mentorship. And then we were lucky to subsequently get trained by Dr. Kingston, who is a brilliant mentor. She has done this for decades in Southeast Asia. And then we figured out the internationals, they were doing bat work in Africa and West Africa with just parachute scientists. They come in, do work, and they don't train anybody. They just have 1 or 2 local collaborators who just are bat catchers. They just teach them to catch bats, but not the actual science. So there's really no capacity building. This is our motivation. And we're lucky we got very, very good training. And then we figured out if we can replicate this, train others to be as good or better, then our work will be cut out for us. We have trained a lot of students, and some of them are doing brilliantly. Some of them are lecturers. They're having their own students now and setting up projects. So we hope that in another few years, we'll probably have a few things to do ourselves.
Thank you so much. Gosh, we could go on for hours, but I feel like we've covered the main elements of your work. I just wanted to thank you both for your time. I found it incredible to see how you're not only working holistically, and everybody uses this word, but it seems you're really doing it, addressing all the different topics, and it's all interconnected. So you're doing everything from education to research to conservation to restoration. You're addressing the root causes, not just fighting the symptoms. And then remarkably, you've managed to find the perfect combination between boots on the ground, field work, but then also how to replicate it. And that's how you scale it up. You replicate it across. And you've done that now through the fellowship and through the partnership and through also, I think, communicating. I hope this podcast will help increase the number of people that are aware of your work and that want to support you, or perhaps also become a partner in the fellowship or in the partnership. Because that's, I think, is key. Replicate this solution that you found in many different places across West Africa, across Africa. So thank you so much. It was wonderful talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much
very
for
much
having us.
Yes, thank you
Thanks a
so much
lot,
for having us.
Lookfar is a US 501c3 non-profit organization dedicated to defending wild and wondrous places and working with the people living in and among them. More at lookfar.org.